been more than 50 years since a Knoxville 6-year-old disappeared in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Dennis Martin was visiting the park with family for Father's Day weekend in 1969. The National Park Service's case file says while playing hide and seek near Spence Field, Dennis disappeared without a trace.
A terrifying scream slices through the dense, rain-soaked forest. It's the sound a child makes when they are in mortal danger. Miles away, a family has just realized their 6-year-old son is missing. They thought he was playing a game, but the game has turned into a nightmare. This happened in the Great Smoky Mountains in 1969, sparking the largest search in national park history.
One of the largest searches in park history, with thousands of volunteers, rangers, and trackers scouring more than 50 acres of 50 square miles. No sign of him was ever found.
But deep within the classified case files and a forgotten piece of evidence lies a story not of a boy who was lost, but of a boy who was taken. 5 minutes to forever. It's funny when you think about it, how a perfect day can curdle into a nightmare in the time it takes to blink. June 14th, 1969 was one of those perfect days, the kind of day that feels painted onto the sky. In the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a place that sprawls across more than 800 square miles of ancient mountains and deep woods, the Martin family was doing what they did every year. It was a tradition, a pilgrimage to the lush, green paradise of Spence Field for Father's Day weekend. The air was warm, smelling of pine and damp earth, a scent that promises adventure. 6-year-old Dennis Martin, a bundle of boundless energy with a bright, curious mind, was wearing his favorite red shirt. It was a beacon of color against the endless green of the forest. He, his older brother, his father William, and his grandfather were enjoying the kind of simple, wholesome fun that seems to exist only in memories. The adults were watching as the children, high on sugar and the thrill of the wild, devised a plan. It was a classic kid's prank: hide behind the bushes, wait for the parents to get close, and then jump out for a big scare. It was innocent. It was fun. Dennis, always eager to be part of the action, picked his hiding spot. The plan was simple, the laughter was genuine, and the sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows that danced between the trees. It was a moment suspended in time, the last moment of normalcy the Martin family would ever know. The stage was set for a harmless prank, a memory to be laughed about for years to come. But something else was in those woods, watching. Something that had been there long before the park was ever established, long before people came with their picnics and their cameras. And it was about to turn a child's game into a legend of terror. What waited in those shadows was not part of any game. A father's first fear. The boys took their positions. Little Dennis, following his older brother's lead, darted behind a thick rhododendron bush. The plan was in motion. The other children found their spots, barely suppressing their giggles. They waited, hearts pounding with anticipation. Then on cue, they leaped out, shouting with glee at the startled, laughing adults. The prank was a success. But as the laughter subsided and the parents began to round up the kids, a cold realization washed over William Martin. One child was missing. The little boy in the red shirt was not there. It's a moment that would stretch into an eternity for William. He called out his son's name. "Dennis!" The name was swallowed by the immense silence of the forest. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of his calm. He checked the bush where Dennis had hidden. It was empty. The other kid said he had gone just a little further back to find a better spot. How long had he been out of sight? The answer was chilling. No more than 5 minutes, probably closer to 3. 300 seconds. That's all it took. It's almost impossible to get truly lost in 300 seconds. Think about it. A 6-year-old boy, even a fast one, can only cover so much ground. We're talking maybe a few hundred feet at most. Yet there was no sign of him. No snapped twigs, no footprints, no childish call for help. He had vanished as if the forest floor had opened up and swallowed him whole. The playful atmosphere of the afternoon evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating dread. The sun seemed to grow colder, and the shadows from the towering trees suddenly looked like grasping claws. The search began immediately, a frantic circle of calls and panicked footsteps, but it was like looking for a ghost. They were searching for a boy, but the forest held a different secret. 1,400 searchers, 0 clues. Within hours, the situation had escalated. Park rangers, seasoned men who knew these mountains like the back of their hands, were combing the area. But as night fell, the heavens opened up. A torrential downpour, the kind of furious Appalachian storm that can turn creeks into raging rivers in minutes, descended on the mountains. A deluge that washed away everything. Any scent a search dog could have followed, any tiny footprint, any scrap of evidence, erased. It was a catastrophic stroke of bad luck, or perhaps a perfectly timed cover-up by nature itself. By the next day, the search had ballooned into the largest in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It was a staggering operation. More than 1,400 people were involved. We're talking park rangers, police, firefighters, and hundreds of civilian volunteers. The United States Army Special Forces, the elite Green Berets, were even called in from a nearby training exercise. Imagine that. The military's best, deployed to find one little boy. It speaks to the utter desperation of the situation. They scoured every inch of the rugged terrain, a 14-square-mile area of dense forest, steep ravines, and hidden caves. They found almost nothing. For days, the army of searchers turned up empty-handed. Then on June 17th, a small, tantalizing clue emerged. A set of footprints. Not from a bare foot, but from a child's Oxford-style shoe, the exact kind Dennis was wearing. The prints were found in a creek bed miles from where he disappeared. But here's the weird part. The tracks were from a single foot, suggesting the boy was hopping, or more likely that something was carrying him. And only one leg was occasionally dragging or touching the ground. It was a bizarre, unsettling detail that didn't fit the picture of a lost child wandering alone. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the trail went cold. The footprint wasn't from a boy who was lost, but from one being carried. The sound of pure terror. While the massive search was underway, a man named Harold Key was trying to tell the authorities something incredible. Key, a Tennessee local, had been in the park with his own family on the very same day Dennis vanished, but several miles away in an area called Rowan's Creek. Late that afternoon, just around the time the Martins' world was falling apart, the Key family heard something that made their blood run cold. First, there was a loud rustling in the dense woods. Then came the sound. It was, as Key would later describe it, a horrifying, sickening scream. It wasn't the cry of an animal, it was the sound of a child in absolute terror. Moments later, Key saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He saw a man, a very large, rough-looking man, moving quickly through the trees. He seemed to be carrying something slung over his shoulder. From that distance, Key couldn't make out what it was, but his mind immediately connected it to the scream. It was a frantic, desperate observation, one that he reported to the Park Service. For some reason, his report was initially dismissed. The authorities believed the distance between Spencefield and Rowan's Creek, about 7 miles of treacherous terrain, was too great for someone to have covered in such a short amount of time, especially while carrying a child. But was it? It's a detail that deserves a closer look. An adult man, especially one familiar with the mountains, could absolutely cover that distance. Special Forces soldiers can cover a mile in under 10 minutes on rough terrain. For a creature born of the wilderness, it would be even easier. Later, in an interview, Dennis's father, William Martin, revealed a chilling detail Key had told him personally. Key didn't just see a man, he saw a large, dark, hairy figure. The newspapers and official reports sanitized it, calling it a rough man or a bear. But what Key described in private was something else entirely. Something big, powerful, and not quite human. What the Key family saw was not a man, and what it carried was a boy. Why were the Green Berets really there? Let's go back to the Green Berets. Their presence has always been a strange footnote in this case. The official story is that they were conveniently training nearby and were called in to assist with their advanced tracking and survival skills. It makes sense on the surface, but when you dig a little deeper, the story gets murky. These aren't just soldiers. They are the elite of the elite, trained for unconventional warfare, counterinsurgency, and operations deep behind enemy lines. Sending them to look for a lost 6-year-old seems like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Now consider this. What if they weren't just there for search and rescue? What if their mission had a dual purpose? Witnesses from the time reported seeing the Special Forces teams moving with a level of tactical precision that seemed excessive for a simple search. They weren't just looking, they were hunting. Some have speculated that their true objective was not just to find Dennis Martin, but to track, contain, and perhaps even eliminate the very thing that took him. The authorities would have known that announcing a Bigfoot hunt would cause mass hysteria. It's much easier to frame it as a rescue mission. Think about the implications. If the federal government and the military knew that a large, undiscovered primate species, one capable of abducting a human, was living in a national park, they would do everything in their power to control that information. The public panic, the economic impact on tourism, the scientific chaos, it would be a nightmare. It's far simpler to let one boy's disappearance become a tragic, unsolved mystery than to admit the terrifying truth. The Green Berets weren't just searching for Dennis. They were trying to make sure whatever took him was never seen again. They were cleaning up a problem that officially didn't exist. The soldiers weren't fighting an enemy they could see, they were fighting a legend. Evidence in emulsion. For 50 years, the story of Dennis Martin remained a collection of heartbreaking maybes and disturbing eyewitness accounts. The official file was closed, the theories faded into Appalachian folklore. But in the modern age, the woods have new eyes. Thousands of motion-activated trail cameras set up by hunters and wildlife researchers silently watch the forest day and night. And sometimes they capture things they aren't supposed to see. A few years ago, a piece of digital footage recovered from a damaged SD card found deep in the Smoky Mountains began circulating in fringe research communities. The footage is grainy, the quality degraded by time and weather, but it is unmistakable. For about 7 seconds, the camera captures a massive bipedal creature moving through a clearing. It's covered in dark, matted hair, and its gait is powerful and fluid, nothing like a man in a suit. Its arms are long, its shoulders immense. It easily stands over 8 feet tall. This alone would be incredible, but it's what the creature is carrying that makes the footage so horrifying. Slung over its shoulder, limp and small, is a shape. A human shape. And on that shape is a clear patch of color. Bright, unmistakable red. Skeptics have tried to debunk it, of course. They claim it's a bear carrying a deer fawn or a digital fabrication. But detailed analysis shows something else. The proportions of the shape being carried are consistent with those of a 6-year-old child. The color perfectly matches the shade of the shirt Dennis was wearing. Most chillingly, the location where the damaged camera was found is directly along a plausible path between where Dennis disappeared and where the Key family heard the scream. This footage doesn't just suggest a possibility, it shows it. It is the missing link, the visual confirmation of every parent's worst nightmare. The camera didn't lie, it captured the moment a legend became real. Living with the unknown. William Martin never stopped looking for his son. For the rest of his life, he returned to the Great Smoky Mountains, a father tormented by a wound that would not heal. He spent years investigating, chasing down leads, and pushing back against the official narrative that his son simply wandered off and perished from exposure. He always believed Dennis was abducted. He held on to the testimony of Harold Key, the man who saw a figure carrying something over its shoulder. He knew, with a father's intuition, that something far stranger than a simple accident had occurred on that mountain. The story of Dennis Martin became a cautionary tale, a ghost story told around campfires in the Appalachians. It became intertwined with the local legends of wild men or wood boogers, hairy creatures said to inhabit the deepest parts of the mountains. It's interesting how these stories exist all over the world, from the Yeti in the Himalayas to the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest. Here in the oldest mountains in North America, they have their own name. These aren't just myths, they are part of a cultural memory, stories passed down for generations long before the first settlers arrived. What if these stories are more than just folklore? The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. Hundreds of species of animals thrive in its vast protected wilderness. Scientists are still discovering new species of insects and fungi there every year. Is it really so impossible to believe that a large, intelligent primate could have remained hidden in that 800-square-mile expanse? It's a place of deep shadows, ancient trees, and secrets. The disappearance of Dennis Martin didn't create the legend of the Appalachian wild man, but it gave it a face and a heartbreaking, terrifying reality. The mountains keep their secrets, but sometimes they leave behind a clue. Beyond the boundaries of science. The case of Dennis Martin forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. How much do we really know about the world around us? We've mapped the globe, sent rovers to Mars, and peered into the deepest trenches of the ocean. Yet right here in our own backyard, in a beloved national park visited by millions of people every year, there could exist a creature so elusive it has avoided scientific classification. It's a humbling and terrifying thought. The modern world, with all its technology and satellites, still has blank spots on the map, vast swaths of wilderness where anything could be hiding. Cryptozoologists, the researchers who study these hidden animals, believe that creatures like Bigfoot are not supernatural. They theorize they are a relic population, a surviving species of giant primate. What many have overlooked is that a candidate for this already exists in the fossil record, Gigantopithecus. This was a real animal, an enormous ape that stood up to 10 feet tall and weighed over 1,000 pounds. The thing is, it didn't just live in some prehistoric dreamtime, it lived alongside early humans in Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. The leading theory is that a branch of this species migrated across the Bering Land Bridge into North America, adapting to the New World and surviving in the deepest, most remote forests. You see, the biggest argument against their existence is always, why haven't we found one? But that assumes they want to be found. If we are talking about a creature with near-human intelligence, a species that has survived by actively avoiding us for millennia, it would be the ultimate master of stealth. Think about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It gets over 10 million visitors a year, but they stick to a few hundred miles of trails and roads. The park itself is over 800 square miles of rugged, punishing terrain. There are valleys and ridges so inaccessible that it's likely no human has ever set foot in them. An intelligent animal would know the patterns of park rangers, the schedules of hikers, and the locations of trail cameras. It would be a ghost in its own home, a phantom that exists in the spaces we leave empty. This brings us back to the chilling possibility of what happened to Dennis. An encounter with one of these creatures would be rare and likely incredibly dangerous. If the Martin family, in their innocent game, unknowingly trespassed into a core territory, a nesting site, or a feeding ground, the response of a large territorial animal would be swift and defensive. The abduction of a small child, a creature that might have been perceived as a threat or simply an object of intense curiosity, fits a plausible, if terrifying, pattern of behavior. It might not have been an act of malice, but a simple, brutal act of a wild animal removing something it didn't understand from its personal space. We may visit it, hike its trails, and take its picture, but we do not own it. We are merely guests. And sometimes we trespass in places we shouldn't, crossing an invisible line into a territory that is fiercely protected by something that has been there for thousands of years longer than us. The mystery of Dennis Martin is not just about one lost boy. It's about the chilling possibility that we are not the only intelligent bipedal species walking the earth. This case remains officially unsolved, a cold file gathering dust. But the evidence points to a terrifying truth. What do you think really happened? Let us know below, like and subscribe for more unexplained mysteries.